Good evening, it's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, Britain must actively prepare for war. That's according to a government review of threats to national security, which says that for the first time in many years, the UK must now be ready for a wartime scenario in its homeland. Now, this all comes as NATO leaders gather in the Netherlands against the backdrop of the conflict between Israel and Iran and the ceasefire that was breached almost immediately this morning. Speaking as he left for The Hague, Donald Trump made his feelings very clear.
We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what they're doing. Do you understand that?
We will go live to The Hague to speak to our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes. Also this evening, the Prime Minister is defiant in the face of a major rebellion on welfare cuts next week. The government says the plans would save £5 billion. Critics say the impact on the most vulnerable in society would be unacceptable. 125 Labour MPs are now publicly urging Keir Starmer to have a rethink. Plus, the self-styled Kardashian of Cheshire admits stealing almost £200,000 in a luxury handbag scam. We'll have all the details. And we'll get a first look at the winning plans for the National Memorial to Queen Elizabeth II that's set to take pride of place next to Buckingham Palace. All that to come and much more here on the UK Tonight. Hello. A government review has concluded the UK must now prepare for war here at home. The National Security Strategy says it's the first time in many years that such an event has to be considered, with Russia and Iran highlighted as potential threats. Now, this stark warning comes as Keir Starmer joins his fellow NATO leaders at a summit in the Netherlands. The US President Donald Trump arrived early this evening, and it's now been revealed that on his way to the summit, he again cast doubt on his commitment to NATO's founding principle that an attack on one NATO member is an attack on all of them. Our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, is at the NATO summit in The Hague. Debbie, let's start with that breaking news. What did Donald Trump have to say on his way to the Netherlands about what is known as Article 5?
Yeah, so like you said, it's the founding principle that if one ally, one member state of this 32-nation bloc came under armed attack, that all of the other allies would agree to invoke this Article 5 principle, and that would mean that they would all come to the assistance of the nation under attack. Allies believe that this founding principle is one of the fundamental reasons why no country has ever tried to test or attack a NATO member. It's why Ukraine is so desperate to join the club. But ever since Donald Trump has come back to the White House, there have been huge concerns as to whether or not he would actually make good on the US's side of the bargain, given that US support to any NATO ally would be absolutely fundamental in a fight because of its sheer size. These are the words that are causing alarm here that we heard when Donald Trump was speaking to reporters on the flight over here.
It's Article 5 of NATO?
Depends on your definition. There's numerous definitions of Article 5. You know that, right? But I'm committed to being their friends. You know, I've become friends with many of those leaders, and I'm committed to helping them.
There's numerous of definitions of Article 5. I think other allies would beg to differ. There is one definition of Article 5, and that is that if a country, a member state, is attacked, then the other allies will come to their response. Of course, there is nuance there in that the way that the treaty is written, it doesn't specify how an ally could respond. Of course, the hope would be it would be with armed force. But Donald Trump has previously raised the prospect of the US not aiding a member state that isn't paying its way, and actually paying their way is again another big element of this whole NATO summit that's happening in The Hague, with allies all wanting to woo Donald Trump by showing him that they are willing to pay more, because he has been so critical of how Europe has, in his mind, freeloaded off the United States for so long. They're going to be committing to 5% of GDP to be spent on defence and national resilience. But whether that's going to be enough to convince Donald Trump that his allies are worth fighting for, that's another thing.
It is. And as they're talking about how we might help our friends, this whole discussion about how we help ourselves here at home, this is a stark warning in the national security strategy.
Yes, the government today published this long-awaited strategy which spells out very starkly not just the global threats, but also the threats to the homeland. It talks, like you said, about how for the first time in many years, the UK needs to actively prepare for the possibility of a threat on the home front, potentially even in a wartime scenario. It doesn't go on to spell out what kind of threat they're talking about, but it also talks about how the need. Sorry, someone's just, I'm in the summit and this is the press area and there's people walking past, I apologise. But they also talk about they focus on national resilience and talk about how this is a fundamental change in culture. It really is an echo of the Cold War era, where the UK and the rest of European NATO allies had not just much larger armed forces with greater capacity to fight in a high-intensity war with reserves ready to come in behind the front line, but also a resilient population that was prepared for war. And the government is saying, as part of this strategy, that there are going to be annual exercises to test the whole of society's preparedness. So this isn't just something that's going to involve the Ministry of Defence and the armed forces. If this is properly implemented as the strategy is laid out, it will involve all of us.
Well, we are facing daily challenges on the home front. So whether that's cyber attacks, which are very, very frequent and very, very serious, whether that is a focus on energy security. We've seen from the Ukraine war that energy is weaponized by our adversaries. And of course, you've seen state actions by Iran and Russia in the United Kingdom. We have to guard properly against those threats, and we will do so.
The Prime Minister will be here at the summit. Well, they're all having dinner together this evening with the royal family, the Dutch royal family. So you've got Donald Trump meeting with Keir Starmer and the rest of the allies. But the main business, the real business, happens tomorrow, where the allies will be releasing a final communique where they're going to be signing up to this new defence spending pledge. But the key is going to be in the detail. For the UK, officials inside the Ministry of Defence have been scratching their head in bemusement as to why the Prime Minister, up until now, hasn't even been talking about this 5% new defence spending target, which was clearly coming down the line. Instead, he was finding it hard even to say that an ambition to lift the UK's defence spending to 3% of GDP by 2034 was anything other than an ambition. He wouldn't say that's a commitment. That's all going to have to change if he really is going to meet these new defence spending goals. But there is scepticism as to how long it's going to take, given the threat people believe is now, and this time frame to deliver the money at the moment is 10 years in the future.
Deborah, thank you very much indeed. Just a reminder that Sky News recently explored what a Russian attack on Britain might look like in the War Game podcast. Deborah's in it as well, of course. You can listen to the War Game wherever you get your podcasts. Well, that NATO summit is taking place against the backdrop, of course, of the conflict between Israel and Iran. A ceasefire agreement was reached late last night, but it was violated by both sides within just a few hours. Speaking at the White House this morning on his way to Europe, Donald Trump made his feelings very clear indeed.
I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, OK, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because of one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what they're doing. Do you understand that?
There you go, dropping the F-bomb. Well, this was the scene in The Hague in the past few minutes. The leaders gathering for the traditional family photo, as they call it. We'll bring you the latest throughout this evening. Some smiles maybe a few others not particularly smiling. Donald Trump, hard to read his expression there. Well, joining me to discuss all of this is former senior official at the Ministry of Defence and at NATO as well, Nicholas Williams. Nicholas, it's good to see you. We'll get on to what's going on in The Hague in a moment and GDP aspirations and all that kind of stuff. But first, it would be good to talk about being more prepared at home. On the one hand, it sounds sensible. On the other hand, it sounds terrifying. How do you feel about it?
Well, I think the government has realised that NATO, as important as it is, can't defend us against everything. And as the Prime Minister mentioned, cyber attacks, we need to be more resilient and so on. And NATO can't defend us against Russian missiles, for example, Russian hypersonic missiles. What do I feel about it? Well, I was in the Cold War. I was a member of the Territorial Army in the Cold War. We had a role in Germany that we had to get from our desks to Germany within 68 hours, civilian tasks. We were civilians in the Territorial Army. So I don't think we need that level of alertness and readiness, but we certainly need something more than we've had in the past 30 or 40 years.
What do you think that would look like then? Do you think it would be the civilians, getting used to using weapons or just being better prepared, having stocks of food that we've heard about from the government in recent months?
Well, I think it's all about resilience and having expertise to withstand cyber attacks, to advise about whether the civil emergency arrangements are in place, because in the Cold War, there was a huge amount of activity about what to do if there was a war, which was all about civil emergency planning, even civilians guarding certain places, not as civilians, but in the Territorial Army, in the Observer Corps, and so on. So again, I don't think we need to go back to the Cold War, but we have to take into account the new and very much more dangerous, because very much more invisible threats that we face.
I'm not denying this is a serious business, but you know as well as I do, people talk about being prepared on the home front. They'll think about Dad's army if they're of a certain age. And then also think about the modern day threats and think, really, what good is that going to do? Dad's army or reservists or people volunteering when we've got, as you mentioned, hypersonic missiles potentially directed towards us, drones as well, and who knows, a tactical nuclear weapon or a dirty bomb. What good is it really going to do to have a few volunteers preparing for this kind of thing when we could be devastated pretty quickly?
Well, I agree. And the problem with this whole idea, even though it may be practical, a practical preparation, is that, as you say, it's discredited as soon as you say it, because you think of the Second World War and Dad's army, as you say. But the problem is, if, for example, a hypersonic missile lands in London, the emergency services have to expand and do their job in a way that it's intense and needs much more volunteers, people who know what they're doing, first aiders and so on, who know what they're doing, than even the current civil emergency arrangements have. So I think it will require our professional police and fire and ambulance services to be at the core of this and to be ready to expand, however difficult it is to cope with a mass emergency.
I'm sure there'll be plenty of lessons learned from the likes of Ukraine and other war zones about that. Listen, Nicholas, just to finish off, we're discussing this as NATO leaders are meeting in the Netherlands. People will remember in recent weeks the government has talked about spending 2.7% of GDP in the coming years on defence, an aspiration at the end of perhaps the next parliament to reach 3%. Now, suddenly, double what it is now, 5%. Is that realistic? Is that likely to happen? Is that what we're going to have to spend in the UK?
Well, I don't think it's realistic, and it probably won't happen. But as your correspondent said previously, this has been known about. The Secretary General has been pushing this idea for a couple of months, and it was strange for anyone who follow these things that he was talking about something different. The UK obviously has to agree this NATO guideline, aim, ambition, and so on. So he's going into this summit to agree something that he didn't have an inkling of a few weeks ago.
Nicholas, appreciate your time. We're going to head straight back to The Hague now because the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, is making a speech. Let's have a listen.
Thank you for hosting us at this beautiful place.
Well, lovely surroundings. I think we just caught the end there of Mark Rutte's speech. This is what's been described as a social dinner at the start of proceedings there, and obviously things continue at the NATO summit tomorrow. Look, ahead of that summit in the Netherlands, the Ukrainian president has told Sky News that countries, including the UK, are failing to limit the Russians' military access to crucial technology. Speaking exclusively to Mark Austin, Volodymyr Zelensky said Western components for missiles and drones are being used by Russian companies that are not subjected to sanctions.
Which companies? There are companies that you think should be sanctioned that are not being sanctioned, and this is critical equipment you think is still getting into Russia, is that right?
Санкції дуже важлива історія.
Sanctions are a very important story, which is going to stop quick militarization in Russia. Because components for their missiles, and missiles are the most painful strikes. Components for missiles and drones are coming in from other countries.
Including the UK?
Including the UK. Not too much, but including the UK. I gave the Prime Minister examples, but it's about...
For weapon systems?
Yeah. It's not weapons, it's components. Of course, UK companies never delivered a weapon to Russia. Of course not. But there are some components from some companies.
So, are sanctions failing? Sky's economics and business editor Ed Conway has been tracking the exports.
So is President Zelensky right that there are UK goods, components going to help Vladimir Putin in his war effort? Well, we've been tracking this for quite some time, looking at the flow of goods around from the UK to elsewhere. And we did notice a pattern. We've been looking at this for quite some time. It's just showing you the goods that are sanctioned now and how many of them are going into Russia and how many of them are going to Russian neighbours. UK goods, black line Russia. Just look at what happened after the invasion of Ukraine. That line goes down basically to zero. So that, if you just look at that, it looks like sanctions are working. But now look at these same goods, dual-use goods as they're known, stuff that can be used in weaponry, and look at them, the amount of them going to Russian neighbours. So countries neighbouring Russia, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, other countries like that. And you see they go up. they go up quite sharply. And we were wondering, actually, in recent months, has that come down? Has that line gone down towards zero in terms of sanctioned goods going to Russian neighbours? Well, the short answer is no. In fact, it's gone up. It's up by 111% over this period compared with the pre-invasion period. And we kind of know what happens next because we went out to investigate this. So the broad picture is this. So these goods were previously going towards Russia, and now, instead of going to Russia, they're going to other places. They're going to places like Armenia, Kyrgyzstan. They're going to places like Georgia. They're going to places like Uzbekistan and other areas on the neighbouring, in the kind of Caucasus and all this, also in Central Asia. And then, generally speaking, you know, the data gets a bit more shaky at that point. But what we suspect is they get shuffled around here. So maybe to Azerbaijan, maybe to Georgia, maybe to other countries as well. We know some of them go down to Armenia. And then we know that some of them end up going over the border from Georgia and also from other points there. And we know that because we've tracked it. We went out to the border between Georgia and Russia, and what we saw there, very strikingly, was lots of European cars which are also sanctioned waiting to go across the border. And the reason why we're looking at the cars is they're harder to hide, but there were also all these trucks lined up. You can see a few of them there. We just don't know what's inside them, but we do know that a lot of sanctioned goods are ending up seemingly on the borderlands with Russia, and then we know they end up within those battlefields in terms of those weapons. It's worth just saying as well, it's not just the neighbouring countries to Russia. Also, look at the UAE, look at Turkey, and look at the same thing. So sanctioned items going to these countries, that's the Russian invasion of Ukraine. What happens to these lines afterwards? They go up really quite sharply. And what we do know as well is a lot more goods going from these countries towards Russia. And that's what's happening with these sanctions. They are very leaky indeed. And when we're talking about these sanctioned items, what does that mean? Well, let's just break down the biggest proportion of these goods. What are they? It's aircraft parts, it's communications equipment, it's measurement equipment, data processing units, electrical transformers, navigation equipment. It's the kind of stuff that goes into drones, into weaponry, and it's the kind of stuff that we know ends up killing Ukrainian citizens.
That's Ed Conway. You can watch Mark Austin's full interview with Volodymyr Zelensky on YouTube. Now, a pair of what have been described as drug kingpins have been found guilty of plotting to murder a rival and smuggling millions of pounds worth of cocaine into the UK after detectives accessed what they thought were secure messages on EncroChat. We'll find out what that is in a second from Alice Porter, our correspondent, who's with me now. But first, Alice, this is quite a success for the authorities, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. The two men that have been found guilty are James Caruti, who's from Epsom, and James Harding from Alton. Now, James Harding was head of this very sophisticated drug dealing network. To give you a sense of it, in 10 weeks alone, he made £5 million and had imported over a tonne of cocaine into the country. Now, he was residing in Dubai with many luxury items. I mean, you can see there, this was a property he owned, numerous sports cars. All of this was, of course, paid for by the profits of his criminality. But when he was arrested on the 27th of December 2021, this was at Geneva Airport, he was then extradited from Switzerland to the UK when he was then arrested by officers from the Metropolitan Police Force. And I think we can actually see the moment he was arrested as he came off the plane.
Mr. Harding, welcome back.
Oh, thanks very much.
No worries at all. Good to see you. I'm going to hand you over to my colleague now.
Yeah.
Listen very careful to what she's got to say.
Yeah.
Right, James, you're going to be arrested. A warrant's been issued at Westminster Magistrates Court for your arrest for the following offences: conspiracy to murder, conspiracy to supply Class A controlled drugs, and conspiracy to fraudulently evade the prohibition of an importation of a Class A drug. So you do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned something which you may later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. The time's 14:09. Do you understand what you've been arrested for? OK.
It's a slightly odd video, that, isn't it? He's almost welcomed back off that private jet that's extraditing, and then it gets serious as he's told what it's for. Tell us about EncroChat, because this is key to how these men were caught.
Yeah, EncroChat is a mobile phone company, and people can buy a modified mobile phone that has software within it that allows people to send and receive encrypted messages. So, unsurprisingly, it's incredibly popular with criminal gangs, not just only the UK, but internationally. And significantly, in 2020, police forces, not only in the UK, but in Europe as well, they were managing to infiltrate intro chat. And why that was so significant is they were then watching and reading the messages that were flying back and forth between criminals. And that's exactly what happened here. The Met say that this is one of the largest EncroChat investigations in history. They were watching the messages between Harding and Cerruti, using the messages in which they were describing trying to find a hitman to try and kill someone from a rival criminal gang. And so they were watching those messages, and they were then successfully able to arrest both men, charge them. Today they were found guilty, and both men will be sentenced on Thursday at the Old Bailey.
Alice, thank you very much indeed. Still to come here on the UK Tonight. The man who called himself the Kardashian of Cheshire admits to luxury handbag fraud. Lord Norman Foster has been announced as the winner of the competition to design a memorial to honour the late Queen Elizabeth. And could astronauts soon be sipping tea grown on the moon? Find out more about that after the break.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Now, a self-styled rich kid of Instagram has pleaded guilty to fraud after conning people out of almost £200,000 in a luxury handbag scam. 26-year-old Jack Watkin used a fake, glamorous lifestyle, describing himself as the Kardashian of Cheshire to gain his victims' trust. Sky's Katerina Vitozzi has this.
This is Jack Watkin, the self-proclaimed rich kid of Instagram in 2016.
People think because we've got the cars, the clothes, all the things around us, the house, we're like, they say we're like the British Kardashians.
Draped in luxury goods, Watkin bragged about his life on social media and, age 17, in this reality TV show.
The teenager regularly dines at the most exclusive restaurants.
But today, nearly 10 years later, Watkin pleaded guilty to defrauding strangers, friends, even his dad, out of hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Foreseeable future, you're going to be in our company for a good 6 hours. So that's where we're at the moment. Mr. Watkin himself is from a wealthy background. There is no denying that. Unfortunately, there comes an age where you are an adult and you have to go out to work and you have to fund that lifestyle. Unfortunately, the funding he may have had disappeared And as a result of that, the only way he could sustain the lifestyle he'd been accustomed to was to commit crime.
Watkin persuaded people to invest money with him to buy and sell luxury Hermès handbags.
Hermès is a luxury brand and it only sells handbags to a select few people, which Jack Watkin claimed he was. And because of this exclusivity, these bags often resale far more than their original price. But the people that gave Watkin money saw neither their investment, any profit, or a handbag.
Christine Colbert was one of his victims, losing £43,000.
Jack was an extremely believable person. His knowledge and depth of knowledge of the luxury goods industry was quite staggering, to be perfectly honest, especially considering his age as well. So I was very much convinced that his lifestyle, which we could see on social media, was true. And to be fair, he was living that lifestyle. It just happened to be on everybody else's money.
That included spending £100,000 at the Dorchester Hotel in London, a spending spree that only ended when Christine Colbert and another victim found each other and called the police. Jack Watkin pleaded guilty to 6 counts of fraud. He'll be sentenced in September. Katerina Vertozzi, Sky News in Chester.
The world-renowned British architect Lord Foster has won the bid to design the National Memorial to Queen Elizabeth II. As part of the plans for St James's Park next to Buckingham Palace, the current bridge will be replaced with one inspired by the tiara the Queen wore on her wedding day. A statue of the late Duke of Edinburgh and the Queen together is also being planned, along with a statue of the Queen on horseback as well. Lord Foster's famous projects include the Gherkin in London and the Millennium Bridge, and he said it was an honour and a privilege to be awarded the project. Still to come on the UK tonight, the Prime Minister doubles down on controversial benefit cuts despite a mounting rebellion among his MPs. Now, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is insisting he will push ahead with controversial plans to cut benefits, despite a mounting rebellion amongst his own Labour MPs. The Prime Minister says the reforms will save £5 billion a year, but 127 of his own MPs are now backing an amendment to kill the bill. Sky's political correspondent Tamara Cohen has the latest.
Getting disabled people into work is what the government says is the aim of their controversial welfare changes.
Right, let's cut up John's pie.
At this community cafe in Oldham, many of Anna's staff are volunteers who rely on these benefits.
I'm sure it'll affect them quite a lot. We got them coming to work here, so they have to pay for their bus fares, etc. If there's any benefit cuts, it'll impact a lot of people, definitely.
At Cabinet today, the Prime Minister and his Welfare Secretary said they would press ahead.
Minister, punish welfare rebels, Minister.
They want the reforms to save £5 billion a year. But well over 100 Labour MPs have signed an amendment opposing the bill. They said it had not been subject to consultation with disabled people or their carers, and added that the government's own assessment estimates that 250,000 people will be plunged into poverty as a result of these changes.
The scale of this rebellion is unprecedented. It's big enough to defeat the government if other parties also vote against the changes. But ministers insist the welfare bill is becoming unsustainable. They now have a week to decide if they'll make concessions. Will the Conservatives help Keir Starmer out by voting for these welfare changes?
I'm just making it very clear to Keir Starmer that if he will make commitments at the dispatch box to meet our conditions, which are to reduce the welfare budget, to get people into work and not have tax rises, then we can support his bill.
This Labour MP is urging the Prime Minister to rethink.
I mean, that's not a very good look for any government, I don't think, to rely on the opposition to get your policy programme through. If you can't convince your own members to vote for it, then I think you're in a serious place.
We asked people in Oldham what the government should do.
There's other places they could get the money from. They don't need to take it off the people that are disabled and trying to get along with life.
Pre-COVID, there's 2/3 more people claiming benefits on personal PIPs than there was before then. So what's changed between then and now?
Ordinary people just want the money to go to people that deserve it. It's as simple as that.
A looming decision on whether to U-turn or forge ahead. Either choice could come at a high political price. Tamara Cohen, Sky News.
Joining me now is James Price, Chief of Staff to the former Conservative Minister Nadhim Zahawi, and the Head of Policy for Disability Rights UK, Fazile Hadi. Good to see you both. Fazile, let me come to you first, because I know you're against this bill, you're against these cuts potentially happening. But as we heard from someone at the end of that report there saying ordinary people just want the money to go to people who deserve it. And is it because there's that feeling that some people are getting it who don't deserve it? That's why this is happening?
Well, unfortunately, I think that is the implication. You also heard that the government want to save £5 billion, and it feels like disabled people have been pinpointed as an easy target. But I must say that no one gets a disability benefit easily. We have to jump through hoops, whether it's to get a higher rate of universal credit or to get personal independence payment. And I think the government, rather than looking at the benefits bill, which actually isn't going up in the way they're saying, I think they should look at why are more people in this country 5 years after COVID, why are more people sick and disabled, and what can they do to support people who are sick and disabled to get the health care we deserve, the social care we deserve, and yes, the employment support we deserve. That none of that has to be linked to cutting benefits, which, to be honest, people now are really struggling on.
It's a bit chicken and egg, isn't it? Your argument is that more people are sick and disabled, so they deserve to get this. You get the idea. The government says it's become too easy for other people who perhaps aren't at that level to get these kind of payments. That's where they're toughening up, for example, like you say, the personal independence payments. They're going to make it tougher for people to get that mobility element of those?
The trouble is there's no logic to where they're drawing these lines. They've not told us why they think people who can't wash themselves, can't easily go to the toilet, why can't cook, why are they not entitled to some financial support? That has been the principle for decades, that in this country we provide some additional support for disabled people who've got additional cost. They have basically invented a criteria to narrow eligibility, and they've taken £47 off from universal credit and every week. And you sort of think, give me the logic for these numbers. Tell me that I can survive as a disabled person, when we know that report after report after report shows that disabled people are disproportionately living in poverty, can't eat or heat their homes, and are actually struggling. Listen to Citizens Advice. You see 370,000 disabled people a year, and know how much disabled people are struggling to survive now.
Yeah. Fazila, I'm going to correct myself. I said it was the mobility element of PIPs that were changing. It's not. That's staying the same. It's the daily living element that they're looking at. Thank you. James, when you hear what Fazila has to say, are you still in favour of these changes being made?
Well, I think the last person in that video that you showed just before we came on had it exactly right. Everybody in the country, everybody watching this wants people who deserve this money to get it and get the support they need, and not anybody else. I think it's totally reasonable that people should have some kind of hoops to jump through in order to prove that they should get this kind of money. And then when they've done that, then they should get everything that they need. There's not a single person in the country who doesn't think that those who are really needing and deserving of it shouldn't get that money. But if you look at the scale of the overall bill here, that every single year, the DWP budget is over £310 billion a year. It's by far and away the biggest line item in government spending. Just under half of that is pensions, which I think could also be reformed, although it would be politically difficult. You can get rid of the triple lock in that. That would free up an awful lot of money. If you just got the general other welfare bill back down to pre-COVID levels, you could afford to do all kinds of generous things and all the defence spending and everything else that you need. And the reason that I think I don't understand about this Labour move at the moment is the scale of savings is so low, £5 billion a year. That might be a lot to the three of us, but that's actually less than the fraud that the government's figures think already happen. And it's about £1 billion a month that we've just discovered are being sent to foreigners who live on benefits in this country. So if you just stop that, you could make this saving 2.5 times already. It's mad to me.
I mean, comparatively speaking, £5 billion doesn't sound like much, but it's still £5 billion after all. And when times are tough, then every penny counts, of course. The thing is, James, who's to say? And the key here is post-COVID. COVID had a big impact on actually everybody in the country. Who's to say that there aren't more people who are sick and unable to work and unable to do what they should do before? That seems to be the implication of this, that people are trying it on because somehow COVID was a cakewalk.
Yeah, and I think that's something that should be interrogated. And I don't think that Liz Kendall, who's the Labour Secretary of State for this, is deciding that she wants to go and be cruel and to become the least popular person in the cabinet by doing this and all the rest of it. They will have an awful lot of data from across the country that shows that that's the case. I just don't think that it's a kind thing to keep paying people who are depressed or say they're depressed or have mental health problems just to sit at home. The best welfare program in the world is a job, and we should find the best way to get people who can work to go and do that and feel the dignity of work. And again, as I say, we just want people who deserve this kind of money, who can't look after themselves and need this to get it, and not anybody else. And let's remember, of course, that if the government can't get through what is the scale of its £1.2 trillion budget this year or something like 5 billion like this, they'll start to really, really struggle to be able to borrow money from the market. And then we'll see all kinds of other problems that will hit hospitals and schools and everything else in the country as well. So
it's interesting, you're a Conservative and you back it, but the Conservative Party will only do that with certain caveats that the government's never going to meet. So they're using it for their own political ends, of course. Just very quickly, we've only got 2 minutes left. I'll come to Fazila in a minute, but James first. To make up this shortfall, because clearly something has got to go somewhere, what would you do?
Well, I would just get economic growth going. The government's doing everything it can to
Easier said than done, isn't it?
No, what? No, we know how this works. Look in the 1980s across the world, where every time you try free market economics, you get amazing explosive growth,
Okay.
and that funds hospitals, it funds schools.
So Thatcherism, Reaganomics, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what they should do. That's what the government should do now. It's not too late. They could have 4 years of a gangbusters economy elected, but they won't.
Fazile, back to you. What would you do?
Putting the cart before the horse. What they need to do is fix the NHS. There's millions of people who are waiting for operations, who aren't getting mental health services. They need to bring the employment support forward. Fine, I'm sure some disabled people are only too willing to work. Give us that support and give us that training that we need. And then finally, put obligations on employers and some responsibility on employers to create flexible jobs that disabled people can do. Let's do it that way round, not penalise and demonise disabled people.
Really pleased to have you both with us here on the UK Tonight. It could all be academic, of course, given that Labour rebellion seems to be growing by the MP at the moment. Things could change between now and the vote that is penciled in for next week. For the time being, thanks so much. Coming up on the UK Tonight, could astronauts soon be sipping tea that's grown on the moon? And also, Ben Duckett inspires England's cricketers to one of their all-time greatest run chases as they beat India at Headingley. The action to come in a moment.
The only way into Gaza for us right now is with the Israeli military. The IDF had brought us in to show us a tunnel network under a residential neighbourhood.
The length of time it must have to have created these tunnels must have taken years.
At the end of the day, it's war at the top. It's war down here.
I'm Alistair Bunkle, Sky's Middle East correspondent based here in Jerusalem. As we were filming, there was a gun battle in the next street.
This neighbourhood, the Israeli military say, was the stronghold of Hamas's Rafah brigade.
It was just after 6:30 a.m. when the first shots were fired.
I remember everything. It was a day that I don't think I'll ever be able to forget.
There's no moon, perfect conditions for smugglers and human traffickers trying to move fuel, weapons and people.
The valleys in between, they're some of the main smuggling routes.
After days of negotiation, a major smuggler here has agreed to meet us.
The families that we've spoken to of people who have died trying to cross into Europe, they say you're a murderer. Are you a murderer? No.
Sky News, get the full story first. Begum was 15 when she left East London with 2 school friends to join Islamic State in Syria.
Do you feel that you have committed a crime to the extent that you should serve time in a British prison?
I mean, I feel like the only crime I committed was coming here.
If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. I can take the heat. The second thing that Harry Truman said, was in politics, if you want a friend, get a dog.
My children will love a dog. In Tel Aviv, a constant streak of interceptions filled the night sky as waves of missiles came in.
It appears to be a very, very large and sustained attack on Israel.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Coming up, we'll find out whether it's possible to grow tea on the moon, believe it or not. But first, Teddy is here with the sport. And Teddy, it's all about the England men's cricketers because a historic day for them.
Certainly was. I mean, it's a time of year when we're realising that football, the world's #1 sport, is blanket now, isn't it, with the Club World Cup.
But this is a day that cricket, hundreds of years old, Test match cricket, been under the pump, really delivered in spectacular style. Going to the evening session of day 5, shadows lengthening over Headingley, and England winning in the end with a 6 from Jamie Smith. Second run chase, highest in history, 371 in the end. The highest previously was against India at Edgbaston 3 years ago. So they're going to be sick of the sight of England. They're going to have to go to Edgbaston after this a week tomorrow as well. So that's the historic context of it. It was a wonderful, compelling day. And I suppose, Matt, as well, one quick thing was just to say that it's been dubbed Bazball, the aggressive, electric style. But this is very composed and very sensible. Michael Vaughan's called it Bazball with brains. Let's just show you some of the action in just a second.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
How do you manage to keep your spirits up and the spirits of your teammates after challenges you may face?
Self-confidence in yourself and your own ability is such an important aspect to have.
I've had a number of injuries the last year and a half or 2 years, and they've taken a toll on my head at times.
Sometimes you just need to grab somebody and just give them a hug, tell them that it'll be okay.
Professional footballers helping young people with their mental health. That's the aim of virtual soccer schools, alongside learning platform Amazing People Schools. Online, in person, and with AI technology.
My question is, how do you deal with stress on and off the pitch?
Football is the most powerful sport in the world, and utilising footballers, we just see them as players on the pitch, passing the ball and scoring goals, but they have so much more to offer. So at VSS, we're providing them with a platform to showcase their mental health strategies, their setbacks, how they deal with anxiety, pressure, and growth mindset, just not on the pitch, but how they utilise it off the pitch as well.
Former Arsenal defender Thomas Vermaelen was the latest footballer to take part in the charity's first ever in-person session.
Allow yourself to be disappointed.
I enjoy passing on experiences. If it's about mental health, my career, the pressure I've been through, giving my experience to the younger generation is something that I really like. In earlier years, we didn't really speak about it, so it's just we get along and we go through tough times. But you hear now players basically after their career opening up about the struggles they had during. As ex-professionals, if we can give some sort of experience of insight, what to expect, or any advice we can give to the younger generation, I think it's only good. We can prepare them a little bit.
That said,
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Super stuff, as always, Teddy. Thank you very much indeed. Now, to one small step for science and what could be one giant leap for the Great British Cuppa. Researchers have begun an experiment to see whether tea could be grown on the moon. It's part of a field known as space agriculture, looking at how humans might one day harvest food on other planets or satellites. I'm joined now by one of those researchers, Professor of Molecular Physics from the University of Kent. Good to see you, Nigel. When you started out on your physics career, molecular physics, did you think you'd be growing tea?
No, it's been quite a journey, but we are entering a new field in space and we are beginning to see new opportunities. And so, if humans go into space, well, they've got to eat. And of course, we're British, so why not see if we can take their tea?
It's the perfect crop, of course. I think I'm right in saying that tea doesn't ordinarily grow in the UK, let alone on the moon or on Mars. It tends to come from India and Sri Lanka and far hotter places with different kinds of soil as well. So how hard is it to just get it started on... Well, how do you replicate a lunar surface as well, for a start?
Yes, I mean, of course, climate change is helping. We're getting warmer and we are now growing tea in Dartmoor, which is where our tea plants come from. The soil is a basalt soil. It's a volcanic soil on the moon. We know what it looks like. We've got samples. So what we're going to do is take some good Devon tea plants and transplant them, as you can see here, into lunar soil and see if they take and grow.
What does success look like then? As in, when can we get an idea if it grows or not, as the case may be?
We're doing 2 experiments, each lasting 30 days. We'll be comparing them growing in their good Devon soil, a very poor soil, because this research is always relevant to people working in desert formations. So we'll have a sandy soil, we'll have a lunar soil, and we'll also have a Martian soil. And at the end of the 30 days, we will see how they've grown, their height, their colour, and also, how healthy the plants are, and how, those plants could be able to be frozen down and make tea.
So if it does work out, are you then going to dry out the leaves, put them in a tea bag, or brew them up in some way and actually
that depends
taste
on
the
our
brew?
friends who make the tea down in Devon, but I think they're already getting quite excited about the possibility, yes.
Because I'm sure the terroir, the land that a plant is grown in, affects the flavour. It could taste completely different, couldn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we already have much of the taste of the tea depends upon where they're grown, on what plantations they're grown in around the world. And it's quite an art, and there are, of course, a huge business of tea growing, as we know. So, yes, we have no idea, really, what it will compare like to ordinary tea. But that's something for our tea specialists, rather than me as a humble physicist.
You know what happens next, Nigel? If it does work, you're going to have to somehow get sugar onto the moon, and then, of course, a cow to get the milk as well. And forget the bone china. I mean, that's going to be a whole other world of problems. But
well, there's a lot of people telling us stories about Wallace and Gromit and their story to the moon. As you know, they on the Wallace and Gromit, they go up there and they have tea and cheese. Well, I could provide maybe the tea, but I don't know where we're going to get the cheese from yet.
It's a good way to end it. Nigel Mason, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Good night.
OK, is it good tea growing weather? Let's take a look. And it's looking unsettled, actually, into the next week, but the southeast will stay relatively dry. Northern and western parts will be rather cloudy this evening with a scattering of showers, and Wales and Cornwall look rather murky and damp, but central and southern England will be mostly dry and clear. Mainly dry tonight, but extensive low cloud over Wales in particular will extend across southwest England and the West Midlands, eventually bringing patchy drizzle and hill fog. Expect the odd shower further north too. It'll be warm in the south. The UK looks mostly dry with sunny spells tomorrow morning, but Wales, the Midlands and East Anglia will be rather dull and locally damp. Northern Britain can expect a few showers too, while Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland will be mainly dry but increasingly cloudy. And that's just about it from the UK tonight. SJ is back tomorrow at the usual time at 8 o'clock. Yalda is up with the world from Jerusalem next. Bye for now.